and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. He likes it when people correctly put out their campfires. He's pretty big on wildfire prevention. He's just letting you know you did good with a hug. He's a hugger.
I just got a bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
All right, I'm going to let you go now. I've got a lot of ranger stuff to do. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
Wait, hold up. I don't think you know about It's Saucy. It's flavorful, extraordinary, and mind-blowing. Hey, tune into It's Saucy, where I give you nothing but the greatest music out from back then till now, along with hip-hop news and trending topics. It's DJ Steph. Just know that.
It's saucy.
Listen to the Saucy Hour Wednesday nights at 10 o'clock here on the Voice of Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes two. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You are listening to Beyond the Game on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I am Jacob Volk. Sitting across from me, Brandon Johnson, Eric Fischetti, and Joe Ardita. And we are fortunate enough to be joined by George Bozeka, the author of the 1966 Green Bay Packers, Profiles of Vince Lombardi's Super Bowl I champions. George, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm doing good.
Good.
So what exactly is your book about?
It is about the 66 Packers. I'm a member of an organization called the Pro Football Researchers Association. We were founded back in 1979 at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we have about 400 members, both nationwide, and actually we even have members outside of the country, in Europe, actually all over the world. And basically what we do is we research and preserve pro football history. So we have a magazine that comes out every other month, and we decided about 2-3 years ago to start a series on great teams in pro football history. The SABR, which is the Society for American Baseball Research, sort of our baseball counterpart, had been doing a series on great baseball teams for years, and I picked up a copy of one of their books at my local Barnes & Noble. It was on the 47 Dodgers, the Jackie Robinson Dodgers, and I presented the idea, and we decided that we would make the Packers the first book in our series because we were having our national meeting in Green Bay in 2016. So basically what the book covers is it covers everything you would want to know about the 66 Packers, coaches, ownership, how the team was built, all the players, media, personalities, everything. All the games from that season, including the Super Bowl. So it's basically an encyclopedia of the 66 Packers.
Okay. What can you tell us about Vince Lombardi? And from what I've seen so far, you know, by watching films and stuff, I mean, Vince was that type of coach who wouldn't sugarcoat anything and just tell you how it is.
No, you're exactly right. You know, and Vince, you know, grew up real close to where you guys are at. He was born in Brooklyn, grew up in New York, actually went to school in that area. His first coaching job was actually at a high school in New Jersey, and he not only was a successful football coach at the time, he was also a successful basketball coach. He won a number of championships at the scholastic level with his basketball teams. He actually coached for the Giants at one time. He was their offensive coordinator during the 50s when they had Frank Gifford and all those guys, and they won the NFL championship. So, the interesting thing was at our meeting, we do these meetings every other year. In 2014, we had Dave Robinson, who was Hall of Fame linebacker for Lombardi. And one of the questions that came up was, well, did you guys fear Lombardi? And he said, fear only went so far with Lombardi. He said, yeah, we feared Lombardi, but the thing was is we respected Lombardi. And I think that's what made him such a great coach is that he had his players' respect. And the one thing that we heard over and over again, because we interviewed as many of the former Packers as we could that were still surviving, and the one thing that they all talked about was love. I mean, they actually, loved the guy. They felt that the success they had on the football field carried on into their, regular lives. And I mean, it was really amazing when we did the research to see how many of these guys, continued not only as, champions on the field, but champions in life. So I think the main thing is that, he has that reputation. There's no question that, he was hard-nosed, old school, however you want to say it, but he also had the love and respect of his players, and that's why he was so successful.
All right, and you spoke about the coach and time to hit on the quarterback. And can you lay out for us the career of Bart Starr?
Yeah, Bart Starr originally came to the Packers in the 50s and really was not doing all that well, which was sort of, I think, a common thread with a lot of the players that Lombardi got. I mean, you got to look back to thinking about what the Packers were before the Packers as we know them, the entitled town USA and everything else. That was all created as a result of Lombardi coming there in 1959. For the decade before that, Green Bay was Siberia. Players didn't want to go there. They didn't want to play there. No pun intended, because obviously, Green Bay is where Green Bay is, the frozen tundra and everything else. But, players didn't want to go there. The story of, Willie Davis, one of the great players, said that when he found out that he was being sent to Green Bay, I mean, he was beside himself. He didn't want to go there. But Starr had been a member of the Packers, really had not developed into the player that he would develop into under some of the other coaches. Part of the problem throughout the 50s in Green Bay is that they had a series of coaches that just did not get the job done. Some were too player-friendly, and they were taken advantage of. It was a circus is what it was. And, what Lombardi brought was organization. And with that organization, he was able to develop Starr into the quarterback that he was. He was probably one of the most efficient quarterbacks of all time. He's a man also of great faith. He's still alive. Actually, he appeared in the Green Bay at Lambeau this past weekend. But he's had some health issues recently. But he was a great leader for that type of team, and that's, I think, what made him so successful. The players really had his respect.
Would you be able to describe to us the career of Jim Taylor?
Jim Taylor. Well, Jim Taylor, again, as was the story with so many of these guys, they became the players that they were through Lombardi. He was a great, fullback. His running mate was Paul Hornung. Although it's interesting, we think about the Packers throughout the 60s, from about 61 on, in 59, with Lombardi, they had their first winning season in years. They went 7-5, and then in 1960 they made it to the title game, and they lost to the Eagles. And then in 61 and 62 they won, and through the early 60s, you had Thunder and Lightning, which was basically Hornung and Taylor, and by the 66 season, Hornung was back sort of on the backside of his career. Taylor, after that season, left through the expansion to go with the New Orleans Saints. But Taylor was your classic fullback. I think next to Jim Brown for that era, he had the most yards of any back. So I mean, he was just you had Hornung, who was the quick halfback who could also, run the option pass and do it all, sort of a triple threat. And then you had Taylor, who would just, beat it down your throat.
Talking to George Bozeka, the author of the 1966 Green Bay Packers, Profiles of Vince Lombardi's Super Bowl I champions. So what can you tell us about Green Bay's offensive line in the 1966 season?
Well, they had a great offensive line. I mean, obviously, you can't have that kind of team without having a line. Obviously, I think the key person on that line was Jerry Kramer. I was really pleased to see this year that Kramer is one of the
senior finalists.
Yeah, senior finalists. Cause
he should be in.
Yeah, he should be. I think that's long overdue. I think the Packer community would agree, especially the players on that team. But you start with Kramer and the others. I mean, they played so well together as a unit, in terms of, running the plays that Lombardi had. With Lombardi, it was about repetition and about, running the same play over and over again and just executing that play as best you could. There was no secrets in what he was going to do. He was just going to beat that down your throat. And, when you have guys like, Kramer leading the way, I mean, he was the stalwart on that line, no question.
George, I actually have a trivia question for you.
Yeah.
Who was the last Green Bay Packer offensive lineman introduced during pregame introductions for Super Bowl I?
You got me on that one.
I'll give you a hint. It's not Forrest Gregg. It's not Jerry Kramer. It's not Fuzzy Thurston. It's not Bill Curry. And it's not Gail Gillingham. So there's only one more. It's the left tackle.
I'm drawing a blank. Who is it?
Bob Skoronski.
Bob Skoronski.
That's not a name you hear a lot.
Yeah.
I'm biting my tongue.
Yeah.
There you go.
I heard that on another radio show, and I love that question. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is. Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought about Skoronski.
Yeah, that's not a name you hear a lot.
Yeah.
Can you lay out the career of Carroll Dale?
Carroll Dare was a real good receiver. He had originally been with the Rams, came to the Packers, and again blossomed into a great, receiver with them. He was part of that tandem that they had with him and Boyd Dowler, and they were just excellent receivers that got the job done. I think, the Packers are a good example of where the whole is greater than the parts, and I think that's true. It's interesting to me too because we just finished the editing phase of the second book in the series, which is going to be on the '58 Colts. Johnny Unitas, Ray Berry, the team that won the first sudden death game against the Giants.
The Ice Bowl.
And it's really interesting to see the parallels between these championship teams because that Colts team was a team of basically players that nobody else wanted. But yet they came together as a whole, and they became greater than all that. I think it's a pretty famous story right now, so I don't think I'm saying something that people don't know. Johnny Unitas was playing on a semi-pro team for $6 a game, and the Packers or the Colts gave him a chance. So it's really interesting. You talk about championship teams, and there's a certain common thread in why teams become champions, and you start seeing it after you start researching the teams. I'm sure if you did a research behind the Patriots or whoever, you would see the same common threads in those teams also, where that they just come together, usually with a great coach who's also a great organizer, and that was another thing that made Lombardi so strong was his organizational skills. He brought organization to Green Bay because basically, as I said, because it was a Siberia, it was just a mess. It was so disorganized, and you hear that with other great coaches. Whether it's Paul Brown or whether it's Belichick or whoever you want to mention, they have those great organizational skills. And Weeb Ewbank, who was the coach of the '58 Colts that we're going to be profiling in our next book, that's what he brought to the Colts because they were a disorganized mess before that. They had talent. He just needed somebody to bring it together, and that's what he was able to do. And he actually had coached under Paul Brown in Cleveland, and so he brought those organizational skills with him to Green Bay, and in 5 years he built an NFL champion.
George, expect an email from me very soon asking if you want to be interviewed about that '58 Colts book.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's going to be, it's with the publisher right now. I actually submitted the manuscript last week, and that will be hitting the bookshelves in summer of 2018.
Summer of 2018.
Yeah,
okay, I promise you I will keep you in mind.
That's fine. I appreciate it. Yeah.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that because both the members of the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants and even the fans call that the greatest game ever played. I don't blame them.
The Ice Bowl.
Yep.
And would you be able to describe to us the career of Herb Adderley?
Herb Adderley was a great defensive back. I mean, this Packer team had a great defensive backfield because they had Adderley, they also had Willie Wood, and they were great defensive backs, and that was one of the strengths of that defensive team. I mean, you just look through the whole defense. You had the linebacker core with with Nitschke, and then behind them you had Adderley and Wood. Some names that aren't so well known. Doug Hart was a great defensive back that they had also, and again, they just played so well together. But, Adderley had a great career, Hall of Famer, and, just great defensive back.
What can you tell us about the Green Bay linebacker corps in the 1966 season?
Well, as I said, you had Leroy Caffey, you had Nitschke, who I think, everybody knows Ray Nitschke.